Hello and welcome to another drawing tutorial. Today we're going to draw a portrait of a man. So let's start with our rough sketch. Remember, the purpose of the rough sketch is to get a feeling for how the picture is going to fill the page. So you get a sense of the composition and you familiarize yourself with all of the main shapes of the drawing. I'm using willow charcoal so it goes down really smoothly and dark. The guideline for the eyes goes in the center of the head, and then the guideline for the nose is vertical. If it's face forward portrait, it's going to be right in the center. Then the next step is to sketch in those eyes because they are the measuring device for the rest of the portrait. So an eye's width, once found, can be used to mark down the distance between the eyes, the length of the other eye, distance to the nose, the corners of the mouth, and the distance between the mouth and chin. Of course, those are just approximate, so make sure that you use your reference material to dictate how the individual that you're drawing lines up with those guidelines. So in this case, here's our reference material. I'm going to measure on the picture to see if those typical guidelines for the eyes are going to work in this case. Distance between the eye is one eye. Distance of the second eye, though, appears to be more. That's to be expected because this eye is slightly hidden by the bridge of the nose, so it is going to appear to be a little bit shorter. So I'll keep that measurement in mind and translate it over to my rough sketch. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. And I'm just going to sketch in the features with the rough guidelines. And remember as you work that you're continually looking for those grid points, so the vertical lines where features line up. The corner of the mouth and the center of the eyes is a typical one. Use whatever marks you can and use as many as possible to get a really accurate rendering of your subject. When the big shapes are pretty much there, start to clean it up a little bit. Rub out those guidelines, and if the lines are correct, the portrait should start to take shape even in this really rough rendering. I'll quickly add some tone for the suit because any big black shadow is going to change the dynamic of the portrait. So now I'm going to move on to my finished portrait. In order to save time, I can translate the most important shapes right to my drawing paper. Just flip that over and scribble with willow charcoal all over the back. Really has to be wherever there are lines that you want to transfer because this is like making your own graphite transfer paper. The downside of doing it this way is that you do get some smudging, so minimize that by placing the paper down nice and flat. And then use a pencil like a 2H and just trace over the most important lines. Now I take my kneaded eraser, clean up all of those smudgy marks, and then I'm going to take a little bit of time off camera and clean up the facial features. So when you're ready to start laying down the tone of the face, think of it as putting one layer of shading on top of another layer of shading. So the most efficient way, if you were going to stack up these layers, is to start with the largest one for the bottom and then build up the smaller pieces on top of that. So I'm going to use my 2H pencil and lay down the smooth skin tone of the face. Notice that the strokes go back and forth and they follow the contour of the face. And after you've done the initial shading, you'll be able to better see if those features are the right shape as well. And then I'm just going to wipe over the top, wipe off most of that tone, but enough of it is going to stay on that I have a nice smooth undertone for the flesh. Once that first pass is gone, I need to do the same thing again, but this time I'm going to start by working up the lines and the features more and then add additional shading as needed. The eye is one of the most sharply defined places on the face. Alright, I'm just going to emphasize the upper and lower lids and the lines of the iris. I can Add a few spokes in the iris here and here. And do some minimal shading with my tortillon. And this large shadow above the eye is very pronounced. I might need to add some more tone, but I'll see that after I've done an initial blending pass. With just a little bit of work, you can see that those eyes are starting to come to life a little bit. Now let's get the rest of the face up to that same level. So I'll go down to the nose. The nostril shadow is generally very dark. Remember that you want to minimize lines as you're working. Fight the tendency to outline, and when you have clear areas that look like lines, blend out one side. Then I use the dirty stomp for doing the more subtle shading on the nose itself, like in the nostril and around the tip. And then I can pull that shadow down with my stomp and develop the shadow underneath the nose. Now, still with that dirty stomp in hand, I'm going to travel up the bridge of the nose and add that gradual shading there. See, there's no magic wand to drawing, you're just taking it piece by piece. And importantly, don't move forward until your last step is correct. The lips are tricky because they look very outlined, but they aren't. And if you over outline those lips, suddenly your subject looks like a clown. So to keep them from being clown lips, I like to do a lot of the shading here with this stomp. So I just put a little bit of tone on with the pencil, and then I blend with the contour of the lip using that tortillon. And by the end of this stage, I should be able to see very clearly if this face is being well represented by my drawing. Notice how I'm putting in a little bit more tone in places with the 2B. And then since this shadow is so large, instead of using a stomp, I'm actually going to use my felt. I can do that same sort of work in the ear and follow that same process. I clean up the line and then I darken up a little bit of the shading, and then I'm going to blend it. So now let's take a step back. Here's our reference photo. Here's how the drawing is looking so far. You can see that the shadows definitely need to be darkened up, that hair needs to be darkened up, but as far as the expression and the placement of the features, I think we're doing pretty well. So now we just have to do more of the same. We need to darken up that hair. I'll just give it a little scribbly, scribble-doo. Dab, 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 broken edge here. And then just kind of build that down. It gets lighter and lighter the closer the light comes to the skull. Then I need to smooth this so it doesn't look like he's wearing some weird textured shower cap. Try to lighten up the smoothing up front and keep your strokes closer together when you get to the back so that these darks will stay dark. Notice that you don't have a smooth outline over the top of the head. Now we're ready to move on to darker shading. We're going to go into these features a second time. Then use your stomp and blend those tones, including the corners of the eyes, which need to be very dark to push them back. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing for the other eye. Now I can move down to the nose. And this is the same process. I'm just darkening what I've already done. I'm going to add some additional shading here in the cheek. So when you have more shading in place like that, smooth it out. And I'm going to use my felt and use little circle strokes to really concentrate on mashing that tone into the page and keeping it dark. So hard pressure circle strokes. Then after the shading, a lot of this has gotten flattened down. So I just need to pick out some more of those contrasts. So I'll emphasize some of the lines just like this, and most importantly, I'm going to emphasize my highlights using a kneaded eraser. So there's the very tip of the nose, and then the bridge of the nose. Okay? And see, then you're going to need to darken up the shadows again. To start work on the teeth and mouth, you do want to darken up the corners so you can get those contrasts firmly placed. That's going to really alter how the mouth looks overall. Don't outline those teeth. Instead, give an indication of where they go by just darkening the gum line, both above and below. For adding tone to the teeth, I'm either going to change over to a harder pencil or use a stomp with some tone on it. And then you can pick out the highlights on the front teeth after the tone is in place. Then I'm just going to add some more tone to the chin, the same process. Get some tone down, and then I'm going to use my felt to make that nice and smooth, and then emphasize darks and pick out highlights. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time off camera, polish this up, and then I'll come back to it to do some final work on the clothes, and then our portrait will be finished. After you've completed the face, you need to move on to the clothes. I'm just going to bump it up to a 6B graphite pencil and sharpen up the outline of the suit against the collar, then fill in that tone. Now there's a second option of using a different medium to do just the clothes, and that's going to help make the clothing look like it's a different texture. So what I do if I choose that course is fill in that texture with a charcoal pencil, like this. One thing to be aware of when you're mixing graphite and charcoal is that graphite can go over the top of charcoal, but charcoal cannot go over the top of graphite. So if you want to use them both, lay down your charcoal first and then fill in the tooth with a graphite pencil. When you've put down a base tone of the charcoal, then you can blend or not as you choose. I am going to, using my felt. Don't be afraid of getting that a little messy. You can always clean it up with a kneaded eraser. Just press it into a blade and clean up your edges. Then I'm going to work on the shirt collar. So I'm going to go to a sharp, soft graphite pencil, add the shadows on that white shirt, and tie. I'll blend out towards the neck with my little stomp, and that way the division is clear, but the line disappears. I'm going to do that same process in the tie. Clean up the mess, and then sharpen those highlights with the kneaded eraser again. And now I can go back and darken up the darkest areas of the tie with my 6B. So the next step, before I can call this finished, is to take a break from it. Don't think of your portraits as finished until you've given yourself a day away from it and come back to it with fresh eyes. After some final touch-up, this is what I came up with as a final portrait. Just a few modifications here and there. Things like the shape of the side of the face, the side of the mouth here. It's the subtle variations that really make the difference between a good portrait and a great one. You'll know you're done when you look at the picture with fresh eyes and you don't see anything that feels wrong about it. I hope that you learned some techniques to take back to you to your studio, and I hope that you'll join me again for another tutorial on painting or drawing. Thanks so much for watching.